Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dr. Terri Show. Today we are talking about eating well. Again, I find myself talking about food all the time, and I'm a hormone doctor. What the heck? But it all goes together. You are what you eat. Let thy food be thy medicine. There's all of this information now coming out about seed oils and processed foods, and we've talked about it a lot. Well, what about when we're going to a restaurant? How can we make better choices if we're choosing a healthier lifestyle? We have got Deborah Williamson from James Provision in the Dallas-Fort Worth area with us today in the studio, and she has come all the way from New York and brought her restaurant concept to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and it's a great conversation about where she started, how she got here, and then how can we make healthier choices when we're eating out in a restaurant. Join us in the conversation. Hey, Deborah.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So I love that you're here because you have one of my favorite places to go to in a restaurant. And so, you know, I'm a hormone guru and I teach hormones and I talk about hormones all the time, but it seems like all my shows are about food. But they're so interrelated because there's so many what we call endocrine disruptors and, you know, all of that. So I want to talk about, you know, your restaurant and why and all the key things around it that are so important. I mean, I think almost every show that I start talking about food and what's happening with, you know, our health or lack thereof in this country, I reference, you know, the big movement that RFK and Casey and Callie Means and several others that are really bringing a lot of awareness. And it's so fun because I bring awareness in my little platform, but it's so exciting to see these big platforms and people on Tucker Carlson and all these shows that are really kind of spreading this truth about where we are in this country with disease and chronic disease that's starting in the womb now, we know. Right. But, you know, that's where we're going. But I want to start with where we are and who you are and how you got here and how you ended up opening this great little restaurant in a small town in Texas. And so just
go figure,
let's
right?
Talk about you first.
Okay. So I'm from North Richland Hills. And I went to school at UTA, and then I traveled off to New York City. I spent the last 2 decades plus in Brooklyn.
Okay.
And 15 of those years, I was running a restaurant under the same name, James Provisions. We opened in 2008, sort of at the burgeoning of the farm-to-table movement. And in Brooklyn, before Brooklyn was Brooklyn now.
Right.
You know, like in the old school days of Brooklyn, before it was this hubbub of hot restaurants and hipsters and this whole regentrification. So we were there in the early days and opened this really sweet farm-to-table restaurant in an old brownstone, and immediately we were sort of an overnight sensation. We had to line out the door on the second day.
Yeah, because probably nobody was doing that.
Nobody was doing it.
Yeah.
There was one restaurant named Franny's, which was amazing, that preceded us, but we were the second.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was just like kind of the glory days of New York, and I feel like I was in New York in the glory days, which is great. So that kind of began my restaurant culinary trajectory. And I spent 15 years, very tumultuous.
Oh, I'm sure. I can't imagine the industry. The fact that you made it 15 years in New York with a restaurant that says a lot about tenacity and so many things. But
so many things. You know, there's a real gift to a little bit of naivete.
Oh yeah, ignorance is bliss.
Such bliss. Just like I was like, oh yeah, let's do this. And jumping into that void without really knowing everything. And I think that that's a great gift in life.
It really is.
Yeah, because if I knew what I was about to go through, I wouldn't have done it.
I say the same thing. You can say the same thing about most businesses, but even just me and my clinic and wellness clinic and what I did 15 years ago, nobody was doing that.
No.
And it just made sense and I jumped in. Now, I kept a day job for 5 years to make sure, but I understand that just totally because I had no idea about business and all those things, but you learn.
You learn, and it tests your mettle, and you're also forged with fire. So you come out on the other side a totally different person.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and you need that. And I don't think that that you can become the person you need to be in life unless you're willing and able to make those transitions and jumps.
Yeah, so I was talking about that on another show with my husband about how just, we want to be over there, but getting from here to there, there's a lot of pain in that. But if you allow it if you allow yourself to grow through it, there's analogies of, what grapes have to go through to produce wine, and this crushing, this pressing, right?
Yeah.
But what it produces is great. So I love that you said that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that, that's where I really spent the bulk of my culinary career up into this point. And I'm totally self-taught. Mm-hmm. I opened my restaurant with my now ex-husband, mm-hmm. who is amazing and an incredibly talented chef. And over those 15 years, we transitioned, and I ultimately ended up running the restaurant, mm-hmm. and taking everything over solo. And then when we opened, it was 2008, so it was all about bone marrow, mm-hmm. which is so hot now, mm-hmm. Sweetbreads. It was mm-hmm. much more French-based mm-hmm. Menu.
Yeah.
And then over time, as things morphed and my involvement really grew, it morphed into more of what it is now. Mm-hmm. And in 2020, when COVID hit, mm-hmm. we went from being this sort of like boutique-y, small restaurant to having to transition into a provisions element.
Uh-huh.
The only way you could really stay remotely afloat in New York was to have a market,
right,
and basically be like a grocer.
Yep.
So I, at that point, was at the farmer's market 5 days a week. I would source 90% of what we were bringing in from a farmer. Mm-hmm. So we had an egg farmer, a chicken farmer, 12 different types of apples. I knew the farmers and the farmer markets really well, and I would transition from one to another. I had one that I would go to on the weekends, one on a Friday. So anyway, I continued that because I wanted to stay open. I wanted to be able to keep my kitchen team intact, even though,
So were y'all still making things but packaging them and selling them like soups in jars or sauces and
we went totally takeaway. So we went from dine-in to complete takeaway in the initial days, and then in concert I developed this whole provisions line. So we ripped out our banquettes. We built shelves up this beautiful wall.
Wow.
And half of the restaurant was really more of a market, and so you could come in, and I was curating olive oils and chocolates and spices. We would bring flowers in, so you could. The flower markets in New York City are just incredible.
Right.
They've been plucked that day, and it's so diverse. It's, the markets in New York are up there with like Brentwood in LA, the Paris farmers markets. Like it's probably one of the top 3 in the world.
Yeah.
So it's such a gift and a luxury to be able to be there as much as I was, and it really that became my church. I definitely have my church now, but that was almost like a spiritual experience for me to walk through New York City and then walk into a farmer's market and see all of God's creation.
Yeah, I was going to say, we see God everywhere.
Everywhere.
If you pay attention.
Yeah, it's in every piece of nature, the Japanese vegetables, the incredible florals, but also I would see it in every person that walked through the market.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So I would take I also wanted to support the farmers because what's fascinating, and this is actually happening in Helene, or in the aftermath of Helene, is that all these incredible farms in Western North Carolina, the farms are still functioning, but the businesses are closed, the restaurants are closed, the houses are gone.
Yeah, so they're not selling their wares.
And their wares are like rotting, so there's a lot of advocacy now, and this is happening sort of in
These
the
are things
world.
you don't think about. When you see the news doesn't really report on that kind of stuff.
No. And there's a cascade effect.
Yeah.
So, you want the farmers to stay in business. And my family on my father's side, well, really on both sides, but my dad's family had a cattle business, very small. Dairy farm, they would also sell their cows off for beef, and then they grew vegetables. And my mom is definitely from a family that was, very rural. So both sides of my family.
Yeah, came by it honestly.
Honestly, and these are like Texas, West Texas existences. And then they moved to the big city of Fort Worth, and they eloped and got married here. And so I was half a city kid and half a country kid. Would go.
That's
and
perfect.
It was so cute and such a perfect Texas upbringing to like have a horse and go, have a
get your hands dirty
and shoot a 22 and try and like shoot a rabbit out of the bed of a pickup truck.
That's great.
So anyway, back to New York, I would, in 2020, when we were in the middle of COVID, the city shut down on, I think, like the 15th. And the very next day, I got in an Uber, we rented a car, and we drove to the farmer's market. And there was literally not a single car on the road.
Wow.
And we went into the farmer's market, and there were maybe 4 people. But all my farmers were there and terrified that they were all going to go out of business.
Yeah, I bet.
Bought as much as we could, brought it back, and then immediately started selling it to our neighbors. So we developed this whole community.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's
and
awesome.
so it felt good. And, it was a lost leader.
Well, and what a way to take something as, which was a tragedy for so many people with just all the businesses shutting down and everybody just going indoors and not. It's just heartbreaking what happened in a lot of the big cities and like New York and some other places.
Yeah.
But you turned that around into something that is really a positive for such a depressing kind of time.
Yeah.
For our country. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and we'd continue to cook so they could come in and get takeaway. And the very next day, I posted on Instagram, we were making cakes, and showing all the stuff that we had bought at the farmer's market. So people would come and they would get fresh mushrooms and quail eggs and apples and I felt good being able to not only feed the neighbors, make enough money at least to pay we were losing money, but keep my staff, the kitchen staff at least, and
support those farmers
and support the farmers, and they, give them enough to like hopefully keep going. And then it grew. Right. And over time you would see another restaurant chef there and people slowly would start to come out of their apartments and, still like we were all like encased in masks and all the ridiculousness that took place. But that was the transition from James to James Provisions. Okay. And then we kept that going. The moniker really stuck and we kept a provisions line. So then I started making things that I would package in-house. So we have like these I call it like a high vibe popcorn. We did a ramp popcorn, all with, I'm trying to make beautiful food that's, I had someone recently call it feel-good food. I've heard it be referenced.
Healthy comfort food.
Healthy comfort. And it's
I've been to your restaurant.
I know.
I know what you make.
It's kind of hard to describe, though, because I want the guy that just wants to have a great burger. Yeah. And the normie who doesn't care about wellness, as well as the vegetarian,
the wife that does care about wellness.
And that does care about it. I want them all to come and feel like they found the right place. Right. And that's a little bit of like a nuance. It's hard to kind of communicate that it's healthy, but it's not an oppressive kind of tofu. And I'm not criticizing tofu, but tofu and cake kind of shrine.
All vegan and everything. So you made your way back home to Texas.
Well, so I spent these 2 decades in New York, cut my teeth in so many ways, learned so many things, and am grateful. Truly the best experience of my life. And I've often referenced it as like probably my first true real love. Like I fell so madly in love with that city. I was on the subway all the time. Just there's nothing quite like it. But in 21, my father had interstitial lung disease and he became terminal. And so I started coming home every week for 4 days. I was flying on miles, and then I would go back for the weekend to run the restaurant and run to the farmer's market, stock up everything for a week, get back on a flight, and go back and take care of my dad. It was my mom, my sister, and myself caring for, and we did not want him to end his final days or transition in any other place than his home. Yeah,
absolutely.
So that was really powerful, and what I discovered was that as soon as I hit Texas soil, I could breathe.
That's information.
Yeah, I would literally get out at DFW and go to get my rental car. And I was like,
I've been holding my breath for 4 days.
For 4 days, and so much anxiety. Also, at that time, you were still like masked to death. But just like the energy here that I had forgotten about, even though I grew up here.
Yeah.
And that the real freedom that is here, that is gone for me, was gone for me in New York. And I felt like over time that the universe was calling me home.
Yeah, that's good. I love it.
And then my dad passed, and my lease was coming up in 22. And it just starting this conversation in my mind that even though I thought I would never leave New York, and my father used to ask me, you know, on the regular, when are you coming home? And I was like, I'm not coming home, Dad. This is like my new, and he's like, when are you coming home? And sadly,
he knew you were coming home.
He knew.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he didn't, you know, sadly he passed and transitioned before I came home. But so he passed in 21.
He still knows you came home.
Oh yeah, he's right here. He's right here. He's like, I told you.
Yeah.
Actually, so when I opened the restaurant here, I opened in this little shopping center on Grapevine Highway. And I chose that location. I had looked at locations in kind of the cultural district of Fort Worth, as well as like Bishop Arts. And while those probably would have delivered a different crowd, I didn't want to drive back and forth. I spent 7 days a week. I lived over my restaurant in New York City. So my office, you know, because you're in the old brownstones.
Right.
And that's a beautiful thing. Your commute is really short, but you're working all the time.
Right.
You know, and anything that was happening at 2:00 in the morning in the restaurant, I knew about it.
Sure.
And that over time, when I left New York, I was kind of sick.
Yeah.
I was
stress.
about 30
we've
pounds
talked
heavier.
About, we've talked about on the show just how that chronic stress and that chronic go. I mean, you're doing beautiful things and amazing things, but it wreaks havoc on your physical health, obviously. So, you know, you taking that step. Well, I know that the restaurant is, and I love the bag. Thank you, James. Eat well.
Eat well.
It's awesome. But I know the restaurant is really focused on, you know, grass-fed, organic, no seed oils, you know, locally grown stuff. So, you know, when did you make that transition into even just paying, you know, obviously you bought organic and, you know, produce back home, but was your restaurant back in New York the same kind of concept of organic, grass-fed, local, or is that something that also has evolved as that trend has evolved?
So in New York, we would never label ourselves as being 100% organic,
right?
Because many of the farmers, I try to buy as much as possible, especially in New York. It's a bit harder here, directly from the farmer.
Right.
And I would go to the farmer's market and I would put my hands on everything. So I was touching every plum, every peach, picking every turnip, every radish. And that was really important because I could really see the seasons change, see the quality of the product. You know, when you just order from a farmer and it shows up, it might not be so great by the time it gets to your restaurant. And so we were constantly changing the menu. But there are so many ranchers and farmers that have incredible regenerative practices. They so care for the land, and they're good shepherds to the animals and to their product and turning the soil.
Too.
It makes a huge difference, but they're not certified organic.
Right.
The cost to do that can be $50,000, $100,000, $200,000.
To be certified in something that you know you already are.
Yeah, and like I'm more interested in buying the most beautiful product that I can buy, as opposed to just the certification of organic.
Right. And well, because, you know, I talk about this even in my book about how, you know, how come somebody asked me, how come you don't ever see organic in Europe? I'm like, because it's naturally organic.
It's naturally
they don't
organic.
have to label it or pay for a label that it's organic, right?
Yeah. And you're getting like whole food that's being produced out of beautiful soil, and it's
seasonally.
And it's not being sprayed with glyphosate.
Right,
and
right.
Just there are more ancestral practices, and there are more protections from, you know, I don't want to say like a federal level, but that we don't have here.
Yeah, we've talked about that. I mean, it's the back of the hand of capitalism. When profit hurts people, then we got to look at that. It's a problem.
Well, that's what's so exciting about this time right now. I think we're in, like, it's such an incredible time to be alive.
Yep.
And I feel that down to my core. And I know there's like a lot of fear mongering and, worries, but we're just in the beginning stages of this trajectory of people waking up, the veil being lifted, the transparency about food, the transparency about big pharma, big ag, big corporations, how they've infiltrated every agency, every industry. And that slowly is going to start this sea change. And
it's a pendulum moment.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a pendulum moment, and I'm here for it.
Yeah.
So that has really changed for me. When I left New York, we were doing super curated food, very local, very connected to the neighborhood, and very connected. Like, we were sourcing from 400 miles. And what's interesting about New York is you can get so much diversity.
Oh, yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
And
Connecticut all the way around. I mean, yeah.
I always say that in New York, you probably have 8 seasons. There's early spring, mid-spring, late spring, and we would all, anybody in the restaurant industry would be like, oh my God, ramps are here. Everybody runs to buy the ramps, and you have like 10 days and all the ramps are gone. The rhubarb's here. Yeah. So it's like you geek out.
It's like Christmas all the time.
All the time, all the time. So, that experience is a little different here. Like, New York or Texas has a different growing culture, and the seasons are, there's probably 2 seasons with like a couple like tiny slivers of seasons in between. So when I got here, I spent a year trying to find the right location, having this conversation about what did I want my life to be like, and I didn't want to travel 45 minutes each way in crazy traffic to be in in downtown Dallas or in downtown Fort Worth, even though they probably would have been received in a different way. And I felt like this area, not only it's where I'm from, so there's a heart connection there, but there's a lack of anything. And I was like, if anybody needs,
there is nothing.
There's nothing. And like, go where they need you. Like,
that's true.
There's a real desert for this kind of food.
There's a desert in the South, in the middle states of this kind of food anyway. There's a concentration of these things going on the coast, which is interesting. Of course, that's where most of our population is, right?
Yeah.
But it also has to do with what's your access to different foods and different seasons. I mean, we can get food from everywhere. It doesn't mean we should, right? I mean, so, and this whole seed oil thing is such a trend, and it's not even a trend, it's what's right. I mean, we didn't, I only just started learning about seed oils over the last several years, and it was almost like you couldn't talk about it because it was censored, like on social, it was S ***** D.
I know.
Like, what are we gonna? Is the food mafia going to be out to get us? But maybe so. Yeah. But you're really passionate about no seed oils, so much so that obviously you have one of the only restaurants. There's not very many that don't use seed oils. But you're a big proponent of. There's an app that if you're looking for restaurants or places to buy no seed oils, but there's no. Like, you're kind of it around here.
Yeah. Well, we're one of a few in the whole DFW area.
Yeah.
And when I made this transition here and started thinking about what this restaurant would look like and what was important for me, I, like you, I'm probably like a year behind you, had just learned and started, discovering what seed oils are. So, like, no one even really knew that they're industrial. They're basically engine lubricants that have been, like, completely processed and incredibly toxic.
Next to sugar, it's the number one inflammatory thing we put in our body.
And it stays in your body for 2 years.
Yeah.
So as I discovered all that, I was using seed oil. I was using canola in New York.
It's inexpensive.
Well, and everybody was using it, and you didn't know. Like, the thing is that the propaganda about seed oils has always told us that it's a healthy thing.
Right.
So,
sunflower oil, vegetable oil, canola oil.
And do you know vegetable oil is just a composite of all the different oils?
Yeah.
And then they call it vegetable oil. It still goes through the same bleaching, the same hexane, like it's just a super processed mix, and you have no idea. They just pick any mix they want,
and
then
you
they
like
label it.
you like me probably grew up with a can of lard that was cooked from, which is the best way. You know? And now beef tallow is becoming popular, duck tallow, all these tallows, and I'm like, why am I paying $10 for a jar of tallow when we just had a Crisco can, full of it sitting at home? But anyway, it's kind of funny how things go back.
Well, also I grew up with my mom always having jars of bacon fat.
Yeah, bacon fat. That's
as a kid being like, this is disgusting, and you're
but it flavored everything.
It flavored everything, but I was always, we were taught same thing about butter. I just did a whole little story about butter. Butter is a total superfood.
Yep.
Bacon fat is a superfood.
Yep.
But we weren't conditioned to think that way.
Well, it's interesting when you look back in the medical literature, or you look back when diseases kind of started, it was all started really in the 80s in the low fat craze. And the 80s was also the decade of the microwave and fast food and convenience foods and things like that. Yes, snack wells.
I ate so many snack wells.
Yeah, exactly. So you see a direct correlation to all this healthy, low fat. Well, what are they going to replace fats with? Well, sugar and, obviously seed oils and those kinds of things. So, but it is so important, and it's something that I really want people to be educated about, because we're going to restaurants. You're one in this whole 60-mile radius of not very many. So, one of the things people are always wondering that I wanted to ask you is, what can we do when we're going to the regular restaurants, what are ways we can order food, or what are little tips and tricks until this trend catches on?
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, number one, back to your previous comment, is get the Seed Oil Scout. So
Seed Oil Scout.
Seed Oil Scout. So it's an app on your phone, and what it does is it geotags you. It'll figure out your location, and then within, let's say, like a 60-mile radius, it's going to pop up icons of all the different restaurants. They're color coded, and when you click on it, it'll give you a scale of, I think, like 1 to 5, 1 to 6. The lowest being the worst.
Yeah.
And it'll basically say like, dine with caution to dine confidently.
Yeah, nice.
And then they really vet the restaurant. So we have the highest rating.
Nice.
But they vet you. So not only do people come and scout your restaurant, that people will call and
I want that job.
I know. They'll vet what sort of oils that you're using, and through the gamut. And most people don't realize that seed oils are not only so bad for you, but they're ubiquitous. So they're in every bit of processed food, from chips, crackers, anything that comes in a box, oat milk.
I want to talk about seed milks too, but anyway, go ahead.
Okay, we'll talk about seed milks.
Because people think they're healthy, and they're not. So terrible. Inflammatory, almond milk, all of it.
All of it. Mayo, dressings.
Salad dressings.
Dressing, and even the oils you buy. So let's say you're buying olive oil. We use olive oil, butter, beef tallow, bacon fat, coconut oil, ghee. Those are primary olive,
Those are all good ones.
All the good ones. I don't use avocado oil because the applications, every fat and oil has a different smoke point. So from a production perspective and a flavor profile and all of that, avocado doesn't really, I'd much rather just use olive oil, and often avocado is blended with a seed oil.
That's right. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
And you got to look at the label.
You got to look at the label, and same thing for
some olive oils if it's cheaper.
Yeah, so you really have to, be that nerd that is looking at every label of everything that you're buying. And I'm also keto, so I have a lot of keto. I'm a modified keto. And I have a lot of keto things that I have produced on the menu. And I've really learned that every single thing you have to look at the label. I was buying these, like my one little cheat is I would get these like protein keto puffs if I was like having a craving of something. And I just would buy those in small little bag for my treat. And then sure enough, I was like, you know what? I need to check that label. Just because it's keto and it's in a health food store and it's a protein puff. And sure enough, it had a soy oil lecithin emulsifier, which is basically seed oil. So that
and seed, that's a good point too, because seed oils are hidden in so many names that people may not recognize as seed oils.
They're doing the same thing with dyes. So instead of saying it's number 5, they come up with like, or not, like whatever the blue dye is now, they'll call it some version of indigo. It's the same thing. So really educating yourself. But I think the way to like approach seed oils and to approach all of this, for me, it's been a multi-decade journey to get to where I am now. And I feel truly that I am way healthier spiritually, physically, emotionally than I was in my 20s.
Well, we talk about that, and we've talked about that on several of the shows of how our physical health impacts our emotional, spiritual, and mental health. It goes hand in hand. They're not separate. You have to really think about that.
Totally not separate. And the food is so fundamental. It is truly medicine, and it's the baseline, I think, for everything that you morph into being. It starts with what you're putting into your body.
Hippocrates said it.
Yeah, and all this ancient wisdom, right, that comes true. But for me, with seed oils are just like one aspect of the gamut, but it's definitely what drives what we do at the restaurant. And then I think starting with eliminating processed food, eliminating seed oils, and then eliminating or reducing your sugar content are probably the
especially a lot of processed sugars, or choosing things that have like coconut sugar, date sugar, honey, maple syrup, honey, or things like that. So what about going to other restaurants that aren't yours if we are in Dallas or in another city or traveling?
Yeah, I mean,
sans Europe. I mean, you're going to be fine in Europe, but
well, first off, choose your restaurant wisely, right? So go if you're wise, I think you'll look at what their offerings are. Then try to avoid as much as you can anything that's fried. It's going to go through a commercial fryer.
Yeah, there's things we can do, like order our salad, but ask them for olive oil and vinegar instead of the dressing, or a plain baked potato that you can put real butter on or something like that.
And look for something that is like pan-seared, pan-fried, roasted. So you can
grilled.
Look for those sorts of proteins, or even, in seafoods, you're probably, unless you're getting like a fried fish, you're going to be fine. And ask them, can I have this cooked with butter?
Yeah.
Can I have this cooked with olive oil? And restaurants now are starting to wake up to that.
They are. Most people are asking.
Yeah, well, and it's not only like the right thing to do, but they're slowly realizing that there's going to be an economic repercussion if they don't.
And paying attention to one of the things I noticed, because you mentioned olive oils that are blended. If you get an olive oil that's really light in color, it's a blended olive oil.
It's a blended olive oil.
Blended with seed oil. So it kills me. I'll say, can I get some olive oil and vinegar? And it comes out with this light canola oil looking thing. I'm like, come on. Do you have real olive oil? Can I have a bottle of real olive oil?
Can I see the bottle?
Yeah. So there's ways you can, even if you're invited to a dinner somewhere and it's not a restaurant you chose, there's ways we can look for things intentionally on a menu if we really want to make this a part of our lifestyle.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And, I think if you're looking for... If you go to a restaurant looking for the right sorts of proteins, I consume a lot of eggs, and eggs are like a good way to kind of navigate that. You can, add an egg to anything. You can go, let's say you're going to order a burger. If you're ordering a burger with the bun probably has seed oils in it. I buy a totally brioche only bun, but it's 4 times the cost. And also people don't realize that the cost of using olive oil and butter from a commercial standpoint as a restaurant is 400% higher than...
Listen, I say all the time, there's a big difference between a $20 hamburger and a 99-cent hamburger.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's worth it.
It's worth it. And like the best investment I think you can ever make in your life is in your health. And that starts with food.
Absolutely.
And the tremendous the cost of eating cheap food is astronomically higher.
Yeah, in the long term.
Because you're going to make yourself sick.
Yep.
And those costs of like losing time with your family, losing your ability to be as active and vital and vibrant and alive in the world. Doctor visits,
prescription medicines to manage your disease that was preventable.
And even in the short term, when you go to a restaurant and you eat a bunch of fried food, because I eat pretty clean, I will immediately get sick.
Oh, yeah. Same.
I'm not going to go throw up.
Yeah. But you just feel, not good. Yeah.
And I feel the inflammation in my body. I feel like almost like a sugar spike, my glucose.
And it impacts hormones. And, I always bring everything back to hormones. And they're hormone disruptors. Seed oils are huge endocrine disruptors, hormone disruptors. And we're wondering why this day and age we have so many young people with hormone issues like PCOS in women and low testosterone in young males and things like that. So it all comes back to just baseline health and prevention. Well, I know for me, when I go to James Provision in Hurst, and I eat a whole hamburger of yours, I never feel sick. I feel so good. And the French fries and everything you make, so good.
Thank you.
I had I don't know if it was at yours, but another place when you go to the French restaurants and they make real French fries in duck fat, that's the real deal.
Oh, that's the real deal.
That's the real deal.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else, any other parting wisdom that you just really want to make sure everybody understands about? Now, you did give me a little gift here, and I want to show people because Masa is a great brand of chip that is the right kind of corn and also doesn't have any seed oils. They're cooked in beef tallow.
They're cooked in beef tallow.
Yeah, it's amazing. And also Vandy potato chips cooked in beef tallow.
Same company.
Same company. And you know what I noticed about these? And I'm not a big chip person, but we'll go out in the summer on a boat and make sandwiches and bring chips. But these chips, just a few of them, they're so savory. Yeah. You don't have to eat very many. And because they're not laden with all these chemicals, you're not feeling the addictive properties of all of those chemicals. So thank you for that. And James Provision, if you guys want to know where Deborah's restaurant is, you can check everything out in the description of the podcast. But I really appreciate we're gonna have to keep talking about some things. I have questions about all the milks and the different eggs, and you talked about eggs, and there's a difference between a yellow yolk and an orange yolk.
Oh my God,
there's a lot to talk about.
Don't get me started on
I know.
Yolks and eggs.
I don't want to get. We'll have a 2-hour long show. But
Choline.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.